So we're going to be sharing the major results and some key home messages that we took from entering this integrated ecosystem assessment world and kind of view the ecosystem in an integrated way. So yes, welcome North, welcome to the Azores for the next 15 minutes, I hope. We are 9 volcanic islands located in the North Mid-Atlantic region, huge EEZ, so about 30% of the total European Union EEZ. Very deep ecosystem, around 3,000 meters, less than 7% is shallower than 1,500 meters, and we are quite remote, so we are 1,700 kilometers from the nearest continental land. We've seen this for both of the case studies. We're going to see it again, but now for the Azores, we did follow the ODIM framework. We tailored it to the regional settings, so we kind of felt the need to divide it into coastal, offshore, and highly mobile species. We added some pressures that were relevant to our case study, and just sharing some results that we've talked before, but so coastal ecosystems actually experience 50% of all the impact risks, and despite they covered less than 1% of the whole area. Okay, so most of the pressures were located or were impacting the coastal areas. In terms of sectors, almost 90% were focused or concentrated into fishing, tourism, and the shipping sectors. In terms of pressures, there were 5 pressures, or 6 in this case. 6 that were over 90% of the summed impact. So species extractions, bycatch, contaminants, invasive species, litter, and noise. And this is just an interesting fact. So we also in a parallel project asked stakeholders from different islands to rate them their perception of risks of the different pressures. So while we are very worried about species extraction, bycatch, contaminants, invasive species, litter, and noise, most of the stakeholders were actually concerned about litter. Okay, and why is that? Because it's on the news every time. So these are, different islands, and you can see that litter is always a big part of the cheese. So going on to the ecological components, for the top 10 components were actually related to coastal areas, but also seamounts. And we ended up with this, we hope, easy to follow figure that was helpful for talking to managers, where we relate the impact risk with the persistence and the persistence of the pressures and the sensitivity of the ecological components, and we had this vulnerability assessment. Okay, so these areas, high risk, these areas here, lower risk, or highest vulnerability, and here lower, and the size of these small circles have to do with our confidence level. So impact chains that are highly documented and they are backed up by monitoring programs, for example, they have high confidence score, and impact chains that are backed up by knowledge experts, but they don't have literature to support it, they rate lower in the confidence score. So we can see that highest vulnerability are backed up usually by regional studies and monitoring programs, and lower vulnerability are actually not so backed up. So is it actually low vulnerability, or we just don't know it yet? So the next step is to do just a little critical assessment of how well are we capturing ecosystem vulnerability to human pressures in the real world. So we're not accounting for, we're not accounting on that previous exercise with 2 emerging pressures, first one being blue growth, second one being climate change. Okay, and why are they important? Because they exist, they're here to stay, and they are very important in the Azores. So if we look into this blue economy or blue growth, tourism, for example, is just going off the charts. You can see we reach a very impressive mark of 1.5 million in 2022. I know it's not a lot for touristic places, but for us it's a lot. And if we look in 2024, we reached 4 million. Okay, that's a very, very steep increase in small years. Also, this is generating a lot of money. It's changing the sectors in the Azores, and this is actually a front page from, I think it was last weekend. So it says, Recreio e turismo do mar geram mais valor que as pescas. Recreation and tourism, sea recreation and tourism are getting more value than fisheries. Okay? And if you go back, you remember fisheries are actually impacting a lot of things. But then this might be changing in the next few years. But then again, going back to the integrated ecosystem assessment, if we have lots of tourists, they need to eat, they like to eat local fish, they need coastal development, so it will impact the whole system. Second one, being climate change. Okay, very important also, and it's been impacting us very directly in the past 2 years. And why is that? Because one of the aspects of climate change is these marine heat waves, and we are being affected since 2020, but mainly in 23 and 24 by marine heat waves in the Azores. And what are marine heat waves? So basically they're defined with peaks of temperature that last for more than 5 days in a row. Okay, if it's a peak and then goes down very fast, it's just a peak of temperature, but if they stay longer, they're considered a marine heat wave. And this is from our data. The past few years, we can see this peak. Okay, just to give you an idea, so the blue line is the average from the last 30 years. Okay, blue line, this is the average 30 years, the climatological, winter, summer. If we go to the green lines, that's like the 90% threshold above the average. Okay, this first blue line, 90%. And then the first dotted one is 2 times that threshold, 3 times that threshold, and 4 times that threshold. So 2024, we were just living inside a marine heat wave, okay? Even in winter, and then all coming in winter here, but in the summer, it came 3 times above the 90% threshold. So it means that the temperature was almost 2.7 average temperature plus. Okay, as you can imagine, this has a lot of impact in marine ecosystems and especially coastal systems. So why is it important? Because it's coming more often and they're staying for longer periods and with higher intensity. So this is an example from Flores Island, which is this here. And you can see this is from July to October, so this starts warming up, warming up, warming up, and says very warm here in August and September. So in this particular region, we went off the charts for some couple of days. The peaks from the marine heat wave, so everything that's colored is a marine heat wave, but these peaks were extreme. Okay, and here, this is the number and maximum intensity of marine heat waves from the 98 to 2024. Number of dots, it's events of marine heat waves. You can see that here you have more dots, so more marine heat waves. And also in terms of intensity, it's coming higher and higher. And they have consequences, and some of you were there last year during the General Assembly in the Azores. Me and Pedro were very worried because at the same time we were at the General Assembly, we were getting reports from fishermen saying fish are dying, dusky groupers are dying, and we had no idea why. So from September to actually until December, we had a lot of reports on especially, well, this species, dusky grouper, Epinephelus marginatus, lying on the beach, stranded, and also appearing alive at the surface. And this is a very iconic species for the Azores, very important for the diving industry. They are also fished by hand lines, and an overall very iconic and empathic species. So what happened to the groupers in the summer of 2024? They were appearing stranded in the beach, in the rocks. A lot of fishermen and diving companies were always also seeing them alive and swimming in circles, but still alive. And we had reports from almost all the islands. So it started here, the outbreak, 45 from Flores, 11 here in the central group. Interestingly, we didn't have reports from these islands here. Okay, it's kind of sad. We had here, this is anecdoticals because we didn't have pictures, so we kind of concentrated in these areas. Most of them were still live at the surface, as I said. A lot of them were stranded. Others were still floating dead. And some of them were actually seen by divers, so still alive and at the bottom just going in erratic behavior. The outbreak peaked in October, and the last report was in early January. So this was in just after the General Assembly last year. We had some samples. We opened them, and they were actually quite normal. I mean, they haven't been eating, but they were normal. They didn't have major pathological anatomy findings, other than a very inflated abdomen, and they haven't been eating. Okay, swim bladder was sometimes busted, so that's why they were at the surface. They were coming up. They couldn't control the swim bladder, and sometimes it bursted. So I'm not see. Can I see? Yeah, here you can see the swim bladder. Another interesting fact that they were very big. So we didn't have small individuals. You can see the L50 here. Sorry, L50. So this is where 50% of the individuals reach sexual maturity. It's almost at 60 centimeters, and most of the individuals that we found were above this size. So that's what we do. We research, and although we couldn't find evidence in the Atlantic, we saw a lot of cases happening in the Mediterranean. So dusky grouper mortality events have happened in this area, being the last ones here in Spain, 2024. That was the last one that was reported. And they were all associated with the same symptoms, the same species. They happened in the summer, and they were associated with the marine heat wave. So we contacted the right person. We were very lucky to talk directly with the specialist for this area, and she, just by the phone, she said, okay, I know this story, I've been there before. This is probably this virus. So it's called encephalopathy and retinopathy virus. And she said, please send us some brains. So not sure if you've seen a dusky grouper brain, but here it is. Has different lobules like ourselves, and it's located here in this small cavity. So we went back to our samples, and we sent brains to Italy. And here it is. It is indeed the virus that we thought it was happening. They did the phylogenetic analysis, and they clustered all together. Okay, very closely related to the Mediterranean one. So it seems that something happened that they came from the Mediterranean to the Azores. And the fact that they cluster so similar to itself, it kind of indicates a recent introduction and also a singular event. So they came. Because they can only survive from temperatures from 25 degrees on, that's why it happened in 2024. They might have been there before in a dormant phase, but these kind of temperatures gave them the opportunity to thrive. So how did the virus arrive? I think the best two options would be through ballast water, so shipping sector, the changing of the ballast water because they can survive in a dormant state in this kind of environment. There is also a possibility of wild carriers because this virus is actually present in more than 70 species of fish, not causing the disease. Okay. So what are the population consequences? We still don't know, but luckily we have underwater visual sensors from the early 2000s. So what we want to see what's actually happening from 2024 off. And because we had a very high mortality, and then this is a very site-specific territorial species and long-lived and slow growth, we are expecting some real consequences. And the second example and last one, which also happened through the marine heat wave, because we were searching for answers, what's happening? Is it in the water? Is it in the fish? So we collected water, and what did we find out? That actually we found a new dinoflagellate, benthic dinoflagellate, that it's known to cause a very important public health disease, which is ciguatera, that was not present in the Azores before. So it's Gambiardiscus carolinus, it's a benthic dinoflagellates, and it was the first time reported in the Azores. Differently, these Gambiardiscus actually cluster together with North America. So we're getting pressures from right and left, okay? And this, although we don't have cases yet of this kind of poisoning, this was the first time we detected, not we, but our colleagues from IMAR in Lisbon detected this dinoflagellated in the Azores, because it's present in Madeira, it's present in Canarias, it causes a lot of problems in the Canary Islands, but we didn't know it could survive that further north. So to wrap up and coming up to the vulnerability assessment, is there a way that we could add climate information to this table? And we think yes. So ideas would be that we could add climate change associated pressures to the assessment, like ocean acidification, warming temperature, marine heat waves of sea level rise at the pressure level. But we know that's going to contaminate the system and they're going to be important, and climate change will just drive the system. We could have climatic effects on the sectors. Maybe it's not so efficient to do it. And this is the idea that we have that we're going to be working on now. It's to add a regional and ecological component tailored to a vulnerability index. So if we add here the persistence of the pressures, the sensitivity of the ecosystem component, and the vulnerability index to climate change, maybe we can have a different idea. And for example, the coastal pelagic, which has to do with this benthic dinoflagellate, rated very low in vulnerability, but if we account for climate change, maybe they will go up the chart. So this would give us a better idea of what's actually happening in real time. So take home, and this was take home for us, don't think it doesn't need to be your take home, but we kind of understand that it creates complex synteratic effects to multiple anthropogenic drivers. They're not easy to combine and understand all of them, but they're definitely important to try to integrate. And one easy way to do it is to use these newly developed climate vulnerability indices for different ecosystem components that are happening. For example, yesterday I was just reading on the plane, not doing my presentation, just reading. But and there are really developed climate variability index, for example, for marine mammals for the Macaronesia region that's just published. So more and more publications are going deeply into species-specific vulnerabilities, and we can add them to our assessments. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Inês. Very interesting. I suppose there are questions, so I will not make my question.
No.
Martin?
Yes. So thanks a lot. Very
Microphone,
interesting, yes. So thanks a lot. I may start with, you saw this increase in ecotourism in the area. I'm just curious whether conservation issues has been put higher on the agenda in the Azores, whether it's sort of easier to convince politicians to set aside protected areas and so on, because there's also an economic gain to do so.
Yes, it's a very interesting and relevant question, because yes, so conservation is also very high on the agenda, and we just set up the biggest marine protected area network for the entire North Atlantic. So yes, lobby is there for conservation.
Yeah.
Is it efficient?
Yeah, I'm just curious, maybe a follow-up to that. Are some of the fishermen who may be impacted by that, are they sort of rebranding themselves now as being, you know, tour boat operators or something like that? So there's an alternative livelihood for them. So to get some local
yes,
support.
it's happening. So you have fishing tourism trips. It's probably growing. But I also think it's a very artisanal and cultural activity. So we cannot expect people that have grown up from a fisherman family to like doing touristic boats, because that's a different kind of sector. So yes, it's happening, but I don't think that's the way to change. Sustainable fisheries, yes, turning fisheries into a tourist sector directly. I don't think it's going to be, because of the cultural connection to it. And that's maybe my personal opinion.
Thank you.
Others? Can't see. Yeah, you mentioned, I mean, staying on the tourism one that you mentioned, that of course tourism can have this indirect effect. I mean, they need to eat. I know a bunch of tourists that actually can't survive on gin tonic from the Peter's bar, but
You can try.
they can go quite far with that. But is there any kind of initiative on that? So try to understand tourism in general. I mean, the source of it, probably because they have reduced a lot the cost of flying to the Azores. We were quite surprised also about that. And how to assess that in an integrated approach. So to be part of the picture, I mean, tourism, okay, is a direct income, but there are consequences. Is there anyone, I mean, a round table, a working group or something like that?
Yes, it's definitely on the table because the price is so high and it's generating a lot of money. So people are renting their houses, and the kind of the whole coastal development it's changing, and we have no houses to live at the moment because we need to house the tourists. So it's on the table, but I think it's one step. I think it's going as it happens and not going before it happens. So we are running behind the problem, not anticipating the problem. But yes, it's definitely on the agenda. And there are a lot of ecotourism also projects and European projects that are trying to tackle this. One of very interesting case, it's for example the limpets, which are everybody likes to eat them in the Micronesia and Madeira, for example, and it kind of crashed in the Madeira because of the tourism. So there are no limpets last year. And we were kind of doing okay with the limpets, but because Madeira crashed them, this summer we had to just collect them and harvest limpets to send it to Madeira. So we have our own problems already, and we are trying to fix because. So yeah, I think it's definitely on the table. I'm not sure we can follow up the fast pace that it happens.
Okay, Ben, it feels very quick, yes.
Yeah,
Otherwise
I'll
you're
quick,
eating
yeah.
the coffee break.
What you're saying about tourism, we experience the same thing in Norway, in the Lofoten area, where nobody can buy a house anymore. Everything is rented out to tourists, and it has huge implication on water management, also on land, getting the water and treating the water. But I was wondering, so in your presentation, it's really focusing on emerging issues, and that's not something that is well identified in the integrated ecosystem assessment today. So does that give you inspiration how we actually integrate this information about upcoming challenges in the integrated ecosystem assessment?
Yeah, that was a little bit on the critical reflection. As in climate change, because it's so difficult to integrate, maybe to add in the end this climate vulnerability index will give us an insight. And as for these emergent new sectors, social economic paths, so expecting what's climate change doing to tourism, because that's also into what's climate change doing to fisheries. Are they going up or down? And then make a scenarios approach with, okay, this is the integrated system that we have, and then we expect this to grow 3 times, and then we expect this to lower 3 times, and maybe do a scenarios approach in terms of blue economy growth, of course, specific to the region. That's my best call at the moment.
Well, I'll close it here. Thanks a lot for this. I'm sure there will be more discussions in the coffee breaks.